Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for taking some time out to join us on this webinar. We're going to be covering off today the future of service management in the age of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of talk in the market these days around artificial intelligence. A lot of businesses are looking to artificial intelligence to help improve productivity and help drive efficiencies across the business. So today we'll really focus on how do we apply these artificial intelligence technologies specifically in the service management space. By way of introductions, my name is Dion Williams. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Soapbox. I have with us on the line today Paul Heath, who's the VP for Product Management and co-founder of the business, who will be taking us through a working demo environment of how we can apply these technologies to drive the efficiencies within the business. At any point, please feel free to add any questions you may have using the questions tab within the conference software, and we'll certainly cover those off at the end of the session. With regards to Soapbox and who we are, we're an organization or software vendor that was found with a view of there's an opportunity as we see the emergence and the maturing of artificial intelligence technologies to really start to leverage these technologies to deliver pragmatic business outcomes. So we see a lot of hype around AI. We see a lot of research and development activities. We're very much focused around taking these technologies and actually delivering practical business outcomes. And we'll step through that today, as mentioned, where we can actually see these technologies working in the real world and how we can leverage them to drive these efficiencies across the business. If we have a look at the evolution of service management and where we started back in the 1960s with mainframes, the whole notion of customer support was far more simple in the sense that we had a single mainframe, a limited number of users accessing the mainframe to do things such as batch processing, etc. And the customer support was largely phone-based or in-person if there was an issue. And given it was all fairly centralized, it wasn't overly complex to provide that support. In the 1970s, we saw that mainframes became more and more prevalent, more and more business processes started to move on to these mainframes. We saw that corporates started to centralize IT functions as IT became more pervasive across the business and businesses became more dependent on technology to run the business. In the 80s, we really saw open systems take hold and we started to see PCs making their way into the households, and really technology became the de facto standard. It was around this time where organizations started to realize that they needed a mechanism to manage all these incoming requests of people having issues using these technologies that were sitting out in the field. It's also around the same time when we see ITIL, the IT Infrastructure Library, was adopted or developed and adopted by places such as the UK government. And that was really to try and bring some kind of structure to this environment to help be more efficient. The 1990s continued to accelerate. We see that there was increasing pressure on IT to deliver service to business. Business was now heavily dependent on IT, and any impact on the IT would have a direct impact on business. The 2000s saw a shift to the cloud and software as a service, and this again put even more demand on IT to be more agile and keep up at the rate of pace that the business had. The business now is able to go and sign up to Salesforce online without the involvement with IT, but expect IT to be able to support this new application. We then move into the 2010s where we see the consumeration of technology in the workplace. We see that social media really becomes prevalent, and we start to see that customers articulating feedback directly through social media and making it publicly available. Looking forward, we really see this is now starting to drive a sense of customer centricity and service experience. It's a competitive advantage for businesses. The fact that we can have both positive and negative reviews of our business out there for everybody to see has really started to drive a focus not only externally to the customers, but also internally within the business to better support the business in delivering that service experience. And we're seeing that IT is coming under increasing pressure to now try and support the business with ever increasing pressures on budgets. So really, we're now seeing organizations starting to look for other ways in which they can drive efficiencies and productivity within the business to start to support the service experience that's being demanded of them. If we have a look at the problem, we're all too familiar with it. We know that the current approaches today are frustrating for the customers and are expensive for the business. We know that we cannot linearly scale the service desk by adding more people to deal with more calls. We know that people are constantly coming in via different channels, and we need to be able to service those requests in an efficient and effective manner whilst trying to control the costs from within the business. If we look at intelligent service management and some of the benefits that and approaches that we can see as a result of intelligent service management is reducing the cost per ticket through automation, augmentation, and reduced call handle times. And we'll have a look at some of that today as to how we're able to achieve that. We know that customer satisfaction is a direct correlation of how quickly can you solve my call and can you solve my call on first contact. We know that reducing downtime assists us in having fewer calls to the service desk, so our ability to be more proactive. We know that knowledge resides across the organization in knowledge silos. And we know that the search of today being keyword-based in many systems doesn't necessarily find the knowledge that we require in order to solve the issue. So we're seeing an evolution of knowledge from keyword-based to more of a semantic-based, natural understanding search of those knowledge artifacts. We really focus around first call resolution and ultimately reducing those resolution times by making these service agents more efficient and effective. So how do we go about leveraging AI to achieve these outcomes? Well, the first challenge that many organizations will find when they look at systems is how do we actually gather the data required to start to train these algorithms to ultimately give us an intelligent system. The approach that Soapbox has taken is we've looked at it and said, well, it makes sense to have exactly the same approach as you would if you had a junior service agent starting that would sit next to a more senior person and really observe how are they solving issues as they're coming in. Through this observation process, the junior agent learns and ultimately they're able to then start to handle calls themselves. So what we've done is we've taken the same approach and we've implemented it within the machine, whereby we observe how the agents are solving issues. We leverage these observations, which essentially result in a rich set of training data to learn from. So now we start to train the machine based on these feature-rich training sets of data that we've collected in the observe phase. Once we've trained the system, we're able to now augment the operators, those being both senior and junior operators, of providing recommendations and driving automation for them, allowing them to be more efficient by assisting them with recommendations and automations. And we'll have a look at some of that today. And ultimately through this process is we're able to take in the augmentation phase our recommendations that are selected and used by the operators. We take that as reinforced learning process, continuing to get smarter over time, and ultimately starting to drive full automation. And again, we'll have a look at that journey or life cycle of how the system gets smarter over time to ultimately start to drive full automation with zero touch within the system. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Paul, and Paul's going to take us through a number of scenarios and actually demonstrating some of these concepts that I've touched on using our Soapbox system of intelligence that we've actually integrated into a ServiceNow instance. Paul?
Thanks, Dion. Assume you can hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Just move a few things out of the way. So yes, thanks, Dion. Thanks for going through that. And this part of the webinar, we're going to go through and actually show you a number of aspects of the Sofie Sofie virtual agent and the intelligent assistant that's working, that's integrated into ServiceNow. We'll also show how we can use our virtual agent to generate not only ServiceNow records, but also records in other systems. And what we'll show you is how we can actually raise a record from ServiceNow into our Soapbox intelligent platform. So Sofie is really the personification of our system of intelligence. You can think of Sofie as having two personas. One persona is presented to a service agent using the ServiceNow interface to manage work, and you can see there's a little widget over there that's going to be kind of observing what is going on the screen, what the agent's doing, and then interacting with the agent. The other persona is a self-service focused persona, or think of it as a virtual agent or a chatbot type of interface that's going to provide a channel of input into your ServiceNow environment and other environments such as the Soapbox platform to help deflect calls from the organization and help drive self-service. So we're going to start on the service agent assistant side of Sofie. And the way Sofie works and is configured is essentially we ingest the relevant knowledge or relevant articles from your ServiceNow environment during the implementation. So the setup is relatively brief. And we essentially, take the in-scope application. So in this case, it's the incident table, the knowledge table, and catalog items, and we ingest that into a training model. We build a training model within Sofie, and as soon as that's finished training, we're able to now predict results from within ServiceNow. So essentially what we're looking to do is, depending on what information is captured on the form, Sofie will try and predict and trying to assist the agent in resolving an issue faster by providing contextually relevant information, be it suggested classifications or assignment, or perhaps potential knowledge articles or suggested responses to that customer. And the overriding focus is to try and resolve issues faster by providing all the agents with contextual information. And I guess the problem that we're really trying to address here is that the experience that a customer gets engaging with a service desk agent is directly related to the experience of that agent. If they have seen this issue that you're presenting in the past, you're going to get a great experience. If they haven't, and they have to kind of guess or bounce around the organization, you're going to get a substandard experience. So what we're trying to do is provide all agents with a consistent level of information to provide a consistent level of experience to customers. So let's have a look at a pretty simple example. Now, reset my password. So you can see Sofie firing on the right-hand side, providing contextually relevant information about, based on this short description. Where we've seen similar issues before, and what have we done with them? In this particular area where we're trying to predict classifications, category and subcategory, and the assignment group or routing information. You can see that all of the predictions, there's 3 of them there, all relatively low certainties. And that's because we haven't really provided that much context for that request. We haven't said what application it is, it's just a password reset. So any of these could be relevant perhaps. I'll go through in a second and show you how we can, with a bit more context, how we can improve those confidences. If you have a look at the bottom little bubble there, that's showing us relevant knowledge articles or catalog items that might be useful. Now, we call it intelligent search, and we call it intelligent search because we have a layer of natural language processing that sits on top of the search queries and allows us to find far more relevant information than what you would be able to find through the standard knowledge search. We're also able to do what we refer to as federated knowledge searching, and that's the idea that we can present knowledge articles or ingest and search on knowledge articles that exist outside of ServiceNow. So in this case, this is a SharePoint article. We might have some Confluence articles, or we might even just point to an external website. And the third area here we have in this configuration is what we call intelligent response, which is the prediction of ServiceNow templates. Now, in this particular instance, we've got templates that are essentially additional comments, but they could be any templates that are have been used and configured to in the ServiceNow instance and used against similar records. So we could kind of simply apply that template, and that could be a simple way of initially responding to that call. Now, anything that Sofie is able to predict in this interface, Sofie is able to predict out of band. The idea would be that if you generated records in ServiceNow via email or via system-generated events from something like an event management tool, then those same predictions, if they reach appropriate thresholds of confidence, could automatically fire and take action, be it automatic classification routing or automatically attaching a knowledge article and sending that back via email, or potentially providing an automated response. So bear that in mind as we go through, and because that's really one of the powerful ways that we move from augmenting providing augmented support to an agent to automating the response of an issue. So if we have a look at this password reset, we'll go back to our classification. Actually, just before I do that, let's have a look at the search capability. If we have a look at the search and we compare this to what ServiceNow is showing, we can see here that ServiceNow is showing some fairly relevant information. We just take us back to here. If I, however, if I misspell some of these words, you can see that Sofie is still providing us with relevant results because we're applying a relatively simple natural language processing technique, which is spell checking. Obviously, we do a lot more advanced NLP as well, but this is just a simple example. And if I compare that to what ServiceNow is showing us with that those incorrect words, we're really getting nothing that's overly relevant. I think we're just getting probably hits on the word "my" there. So if we take this back and we have a look at how we could improve the classification results, the prediction results. Let's say we provide some more information. Let's say we tell it that there's a reset my Salesforce password. Based on that additional contextual information, we're now increasing the confidence of the CRM password reset prediction. And you can see because we're past a certain threshold, it's automatically setting those values. Now, one of the important distinctions between how we do it and how others, including ServiceNow, apply this type of technology is that we provide agents with options. Now, it may not be the #1 prediction here based on the training data. The training data may be inconsistent or potentially not appropriate in this particular use case. So we provide the agents with the ability to select other options, and we give them the ability to provide a reason why they selected that if they choose to, so we can analyze that afterwards. But even if we don't provide any additional information, if we save this record, that we add weighting to this particular prediction. If we do that often enough, then we're going to increase the weighting and of the second option. It'll become the first option. So we're really providing a real-time feedback learning loop that agents are able to, by interacting with Sofie and by creating new records in the system, we're able to improve that learning algorithm. So that's a really important key distinction between ourselves and other solutions in the market. Now, people often ask, well, how much data do you need? What happens when we've got a new issue in the system, something we've never seen before? How does the system handle that? So the answer to that, let me just create a new incident here. The answer to that is that we only need a handful of records to be able to start learning. So if I take this example, printer is jammed. We haven't seen this, actually. We have seen this one before. I had done a couple of examples before, obviously too many. But by default, if we haven't seen any, we wouldn't have got a prediction if I think I created about 5. Let's have a look at it just prior to the webinar starting. You can see there's 3 of them there. All it took us was 3 records, and we were able to start a prediction. If I try something completely, well, it's probably no point in providing doing something completely random, but the idea is that we only need a relatively small amount of records before we'll start predicting that. And if you compare that to others, you'll need to go, if your data has changed, or you've got a new service, you need to go back to your training data, revise that training data, retrain the model, bring it back into production and see how it's working. If it's not working right, you take it back and you train it again. So this idea of a dynamic feedback loop is a really key point of difference. Now let's switch text to the virtual agent. So this is a ServiceNow portal. By design, we typically try and get a very lightweight Google-like design. Now, what we find is that customers, as they invest in Service Portal within ServiceNow, they're building out lots of catalog items, lots of knowledge articles, lots of categories of things, and the feedback from their customer base is, I just can't find what I'm looking for. There's too much going on. So the idea of being able to provide a search interface that provides a rich semantic natural language kind of overlay to find the right artifact that you're looking for is really a key point of difference before you even get into the virtual agent kind of chat conversation. So let's have a look at an example, and we'll see how Sofie interacts with us. Let's take a pretty simple example and a very ambiguous statement. If you had the statement coming into the service desk via email or on the phone, an agent probably wouldn't know, they couldn't do anything with it. So what we're trying to do with the virtual agent, you can see Sofie's popping up on the right-hand side there. We're trying to simulate what a human operator would say, or how they would kind of go about trying to understand what the real issue is, try and clarify the intent of the issue, and try and work through some diagnostic steps. And if they can't resolve it, they'll probably forward on to the appropriate team. So let's step through that process and see how Sofie would interact with this customer, Paul Heath, logged in. By the way, we also provide other channels, so I won't show you in this webinar, but we provide Slack and Teams integration, so you can go in just to those channels and have an interaction with Sofie without even going anywhere near ServiceNow. So let's have a look at what Sofie's come up with. She said, if I understand you correctly, you can't access the application. And application, we haven't said which one. Is that correct? Yes. So we can either just type in responses here in natural language, or we could click on those little buttons there. What system are you trying to access? That sounds like a good question to ask. It's Salesforce. And in this scenario, I'm going to assume there's a networking issue. I'm going to assume there's a site-wide issue that is causing the problem that we need to have it investigated. So how would we determine that? Well, let's find out if it's a login issue, like a password or a session lock, or they just simply can't access it. I can't access it, and they may not be able to access it because it could be they've never had access, and this could be a system request. But in this particular case, we're going to ask some questions to narrow that down. Can you access the network to try and determine if this is a networking issue? Let's say we can't. Okay, well, is this affecting just you? Maybe it's a localized issue, or more than, or is it affecting others? Let's say it's affecting others. As you can see, I don't need to type in exactly the wording in those options there. I can just do something that's close to that. System will understand. And this is really demonstrating. This next step is demonstrating how closely integrated we are to ServiceNow, where we've gone into the Paul Heath's user record. We've looked at the default location for that user, and we're asking, are you talking about this location where you're having this issue? I'm going to say no, it's a different location. And as I start typing here, we're doing a direct query into the ServiceNow location table, so you can see how quick that is. And what is happening now behind the scenes is Sofie is grabbing the CI, the router that's associated with that location, looking up the IP address associated with that router, passing that IP address to a ServiceNow script that's running an external ping service. We're pinging essentially that IP address to see if we can get access to it and waiting for the response. In this particular scenario, the result was a fail, and so we've logged a call with the service desk to try and raise it. We've given them the incident number so they can follow up on this, and they can interrogate Sofie through this interface, say what's happening with this incident or what's happening with my job, and we can kind of update that record or get the assignee to call us back, all those types of things. So if we have a look at that incident, just to see what's happened now on the agent side of the world, you can see that Sofie's logged in a call, but she's done a number of other things as well. So we've populated some key information from the conversation, including the location. We've automatically classified and routed this call, as you can see up here, using the information that we, using the Sofie prediction capabilities. We've captured the IP address, the router where we got the IP address from. We've set the impact and urgency based on this being a pretty significant issue. We've copied the test results from our ping, and then we've also put all the chat history. And the idea is that by the time someone in the network team picks this up, they should have enough information to be able to do something useful. And most importantly, not have to, it's bypass the service desk. And in theory, that someone on the network team probably has enough information that they don't have to go back and call Paul Heath here to find out what's been going on, especially when that may have happened sometime in the past. So just that's, we think, a really good example of how Sofie is intended to work, which is to use the virtual agent to try and understand an issue, try and diagnose, try and resolve it as much as we can. And if not, then log a call on ServiceNow, route it, try and get it to the right team so they can be armed to try and service that. So let's go back and look at just a couple more examples. One situation we often get asked about is, can Sofie help complete other processes and fulfill other processes within ServiceNow? And so this next example would be someone trying to log a leave request. Let's assume that ServiceNow is running, well, in this case they are, that ServiceNow has a leave application form within the system, and rather than trying to hunt around and try and find that leave application, all the user needs to do is ask the question. I need to take 2 days of family leave starting next Tuesday. And you can see here that Sofie's identified that this is likely to be a leave of absence request, and has brought up the form, and then is offering to complete that form. So let's say yes to that. We're extracting information out of that, the initial statement, like the leave type and the start date being next Tuesday, the end date being 2 days from next Tuesday, just confirming that in the dialogue there, and we're asking, is there any reason why you're taking the leave? Because I'm tired. And then allowing us to submit that request. Now, obviously, if we were doing this on Slack, we wouldn't have the form here, but we're kind of demonstrating how we would use that conversational interface to bypass going to the portal or having a user have to use a form. I just wanted to show you one further example of that, which would be, let's say, in fact, this is an example from a real customer we've got who needed to deal with a high volume of calls. I think they had about 10 to 15% calls coming into the HR service desk around their leave application. Sorry, not their leave application, around their expenses. So they're inquiring whether or not their expenses that have been submitted would be paid this month. And typically, if they hadn't, well, there was a policy in place that if they'd missed the cutoff date that was specific to their region, then the system, they wouldn't get paid, and they would typically get upset and ask for it to be escalated, and that would raise an HR case. So if I have a quick look at this example, let's use our voice recognition as well. Again, when will my expenses be paid? If I understand you correctly, you're having an issue with an expense request. Yes, I am. Is it the most recent one? No. So Sofie's going into ServiceNow and extracting that information around my open requests. I'm going to say it's this recent one, or will be 2 years ago. Excuse the data. And it has run a test, checked that policy. It looks like we've missed the cutoff date based on when we submitted it. So it's going to be paid in the next pay run. Is that okay? No, it's not. Okay, would you like me to escalate this? Yes. I need the cash. And that will go off and create an HR case in the system. And if I had a quick look at that HR case, you'll also see that Sofie is configured to fire on the HR case table as well. You can see that we've automatically classified and routed this. You can see the comments have been added to the activities field. So the last example I wanted to take you through is what we mentioned earlier, that not all organizations, or not all processes within an organization are run through ServiceNow. Now, often they might be processes that are existing in other systems like Zendesk or our own system, Soapbox. But organizations want a centralized point of contact for their employees to be able to interface with various support organizations, irrespective of the back-end workflow engine. So I've just gone to another instance. You can see here that this is just another view of a portal page with a different representation of that search box. In this particular case, I'm trying to understand what my lead balance is. And so what we're going to do through this process is we're going to see if there's any potential knowledge articles or catalog items, forms that might be useful. And if not, we're going to raise a ticket, in this case on the Soapbox platform, and we'll demonstrate how we can use our intelligent actions on the Soapbox platform to go and interrogate Workday, bring back the leave balance, and also kick off an approval process. So let's have a look at that. What would I say? What is my leave balance? Seems like a reasonable thing to say. So Sofie's popped up and said, look, I don't necessarily have a specific understanding of what I can do in this case, but here's some artifacts that might be useful. Some knowledge articles, some catalog items. These may be useful. I'm just going to suggest that they're not in this case. Would you like me to log a ticket? Sofie asked. Yes, I would. That'd be lovely. What type of ticket? I'm going to log an HR ticket. Is it for me or someone else? I'm going to say it's for me. Although if I said someone else, I'll be able to do a lookup into the ServiceNow user table, select someone else, but I'm just going to say it's for me. Can you provide some details? I think I need to go into negative leave. Confirm. And that's gone off and generated an HR case record in our Soapbox platform. So let's have a look at that, see what that looks like. Here's a employee self-service view of that form where we can communicate and update with the person that's assigned to that. But I'm logged in as the administrator. That's why you see options on the left-hand side. I just want to take you into what an agent view of that case may look like. Let's have a look at the last one. Here it is. So Sofie's done a number of things on this record. It's classified it just like we did in ServiceNow. So it's classified it as a leave management leave request against the HR payroll service and assigned it to the HR service desk. But it's also gone off and run an automated action that is getting fired to go and pass my name, my details to Workday and bring back my current leave balance, which is useful in its own right. But now that it's identified that my leave balance is a bit too low and probably I do need to go into negative leave balance, so it's kicked off a subtask. If I have a look at that task, and let's say I could have this as an approval step, but for simplicity, let's just say we approved it. We've set it to closed, and we can go back and have a look at the parent record, and that's updated the information in the customer communications and sent that out. We have also had that configured to send an email out to the customer. So if I have a look at what that may look like, we've got an email hopefully being received by myself here saying what my leave balance was. So that's all I wanted to cover off. Just conscious of time, and I'm sure there's a few questions. So I'll pass it back to Dion.
Great, thank you, Paul. Appreciate stepping through, and hopefully that's helped give a sense of how you can use AI to not only do self-service. I know chatbots are very topical, but as we've seen from that session, it's not just about chatbots. There's a multitude of areas where we can apply these technologies to help drive efficiency, be that on the self-service front or even on the service agent side of things. So thanks for that, Paul.
Oh, actually, Dion, one thing I did forget is since I noticed we've got a little bit of time, would you like me to just show how some end-to-end automation would happen on the Soapbox platform?
Yeah, sure. So certainly. So what you've seen is integrated into ServiceNow. We've gone a long way in leveraging the data available to maximize what we can do. Maybe what Paul can step you through now is, where we look at using a platform that was built for AI. What are some of the additional features and benefits you can realize?
Yeah, so here's our platform's view of an incident form. It's a logo call against Desmond. In this particular case, I'm going to suggest I've got an SAP session locked. SAP session is locked. And there's a number of things that are going to happen here. You can see on the activity that Sofie's kind of firing out. We've found some knowledge articles that might be useful. We can have a look at those. There's some knowledge articles that might be applicable. We've found some actions. In fact, one action has been of high enough confidence that we've automatically fired it. And that one was to check the SAP session. So if I have a look at that again, there's the check SAP session. But we've also got some other actions that have been predicted based on where operators have used similar actions in the past to solve, or actions in the past to solve similar issues. So we can, it looks like we've got one that might be relevant here. We can execute that. This didn't automatically fire because some actions you don't want to automatically fire by design because they may have unintended consequences. But that's a configuration. I can execute that. We can see it's run off and fired a script in this case to unlock that SAP session. And it's confirmed that this SAP session is unlocked. But I might also want to see what knowledge articles that we found here that might be relevant, that we might want to send to Desmond so he might be able to get himself out of trouble himself next time. So there's a knowledge article here that might look relevant. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, that looks like it could be what we need. So let's attach that to our record. And it pops up as an attachment. I can set that to resolved. The status becomes resolved. Our SLA is stopped. We've sent that communication off to the customer via an email. So you can see in just a couple of clicks that we're able to identify the issue, provide resolution activities, provide relevant knowledge, and resolve that directly. Now, if that was to having done that several times, if we were to come in via an email, a similar call came in via email, we could automatically take those steps. If a user was coming in via the virtual agent, they could type in a similar description of their issue, and we would present automated actions and suggested knowledge in the virtual agent. So really automating the resolution of that process directly without even generating a record. Back over to you, Dan.
Great, thanks, Paul. So yeah, again, hopefully that gives you a sense of what is possible, of really actually using AI to do something useful and meaningful. The important thing to have noted is it's all there in the back end. You didn't have to go in and do all sorts of complex data science configuration. It's intentionally been architected and developed in a manner that is intuitive and easy to use for system administrators. So I'll open up the floor for questions. There's a few questions that have come in. Starting from the top, there's a question that's come in: implementation timeframes and what's involved for implementing or integrating into ServiceNow. So what you've seen today was where we've integrated our system of intelligence into the ServiceNow platform. The integration is fairly straightforward. It's a simple matter of we integrate into the platform, we connect the two systems together, we extract the data securely that we need to train the models, we run that training process, and the system then starts to provide those predictions. Time taken for that, anything from 20 minutes to a few hours, really dependent on the amount of data in the particular system. Similarly for knowledge, really dependent on the size of the knowledge, the number of attachments, etc. We ingest that, we apply our natural language indexing model across that, and then we're able to serve that back. Typically, we'll find customers will be anything from 5 to 10 days from start a project until they're up and running in production. So fairly short, sharp timeframes to get the system implemented and up and running. Next question is, ServiceNow has an AI capability. How does yours compare? I might divert to Paul on that from a technical aspect of some of the details. Paul, if you want to take that one.
Sure. So the ServiceNow have two broad offerings that kind of overlap with our offering. One is the agent intelligence capability, which is similar to our prediction capability, and the other is the virtual agent. So the key point of difference around our agent intelligence versus what we're doing around prediction, but there's two things. One, the key thing really is what I mentioned earlier, is that real-time learning feedback loop. The idea that you can start with relatively low levels of data and then improve the training model based on the operator interaction and every new record that comes in. In ServiceNow, you really have to focus on the training, and if the training model isn't working for you, you need to go back and do it again. ServiceNow recommend you do that at least, or not more than every 30 days, last I heard. And the challenge with that, of course, is you're always 30 days out of date, so to speak, as new things are coming in, new learning opportunities exist, new services get rolled out. Then you're always that kind of step out of data. And there's also the issue of the quality of the historical data. So that's why we didn't take that approach. The other key point of difference that sits across both the virtual agent and our agent assistant is our natural language capability. So we apply natural language, as I mentioned, against search. ServiceNow doesn't do that. They also don't do that federated search capability. And also our virtual agent has that natural language overlay on top. And at the moment, even though they have made an acquisition where they're not doing anything in that area at the moment. Dan? Dan, looks like you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was talking to myself. So we've had another question come in. How about setting up orchestration? Use an example of unlocking SAP. My experience is this is complicated and very expensive. So the orchestration aspect is, depending on what you have in place today, we'll integrate into existing orchestration tools. So if you're using ServiceNow and you've got orchestration instrumented within your ServiceNow platform, is we can integrate into that to run orchestration. If you don't have that, the ServiceNow orchestration, is we can certainly do one of two things. And again, depending on the complexity of the orchestration. The first one is we can do basic actions being fired directly out of our back end by firing off particular scripts, etc., that need to be done. If the orchestration requires a more complex, so it fires something based on a result that drives a follow-on orchestration, then whilst we don't provide an orchestration engine within our product, we do provide customers an open source product that was developed by IBM, and it's called Node-RED. It's extremely robust and scalable. It's used in the world of Internet of Things. It's a drag and drop user interface to build out your orchestration, and it provides you with all the security that you would have with the ServiceNow-like orchestration, where you can have a mid-server sitting behind a firewall executing any number of actions that you may have. So a number of options that are available. What we use Node-RED, where we tightly integrate into that to go and fire those orchestrations. But as I said, you could certainly use ServiceNow, although I do understand there are certain costs associated to running those orchestrations with ServiceNow. Another question that's come in is, can we coexist with ServiceNow? So probably a good follow-on to what we've just mentioned. So yeah, absolutely. I think what Paul demonstrated is where we have the virtual agent sitting on the ServiceNow portal. Customers have said in the past that, look, we have this business demand from customers or from business departments to digitize workflows, but it's too costly on the ServiceNow platform. Can we digitize those on your platform? Yes, absolutely. You can digitize them on our platform, run all the workflows, but still provide a unified interface where the calls are captured via a single portal, and then the processes are driven in the back end. So definitely coexist.
It's also probably worthwhile pointing out, down that we can coexist within their intelligent automation capability as well. So if a customer chose to use the ServiceNow virtual agent, that will still work with our agent side assistant and vice versa.
Correct. So follow on to a previous question, can we search things like TechNet? Yes, absolutely. I mean, essentially in the back end, what's happening is we have a data store that we ingest the data into, we federate all that knowledge, and we use that to apply the natural language. It really depends on the format. So as long as it's an ASCII file format that is available on TechNet, we can pull that data in. Depending on if it's a website, if we have to crawl that website, then we'd have to look at putting a crawler in place to crawl the website. If there's a direct API access to that to read the data in, then we'd simply do that. So a number of options as to how we get the data. The critical thing is that the format of the data is ASCII format for us to read. That includes things like attachments, for example, so PDF documents, Word documents, etc. We can ingest those. Similarly with Google Docs. So, you know, some customers have a Google Drive where they have a bunch of information, be it policies or procedure documents. We can connect into the Google Drive document, ingest those Google Docs, and obviously then index them and then make them available through the interface that you've seen. Another question is, you know, who are customers? Some of the customers that are running our platforms, customers that well-known brands like KPMG and News Limited. KPMG use it on two fronts. They use it both in their HR business as well as within the IT department. They use it for HR to service the common requests that they have. As Paul indicated, a very common one in the HR space is, how much leave do I have? Where can I get a reprint of my pay slip? You know, what's the maternity leave policy? All these kinds of things is we can fully automate those requests for them, reducing the number of calls that the HR services people have to manage. And then similarly on the IT side of things, they use it in that space. News Limited, for example, they had a very large number of calls that were coming in of people just doing the classic follow-up of what's the status of my call. using the Sofie interface, that's easily achieved where Sofie provides that to them. Paul touched on that interface doesn't have to be ServiceNow. So that could be Slack, could be a collaboration tool, or Microsoft Teams. You don't have to now go to the ServiceNow portal to find out the status of your incident. You can simply via Slack say, at Sofie, what's the status of the call I logged yesterday? And Sofie will bring back the latest operator comments on that particular call, and then you'll be prompted, would you like to add additional comments? Yes, and that'll then go and update the ticket in ServiceNow. So full integration with technologies like Slack and Microsoft Teams. Another question, trial instance available? Yeah, absolutely. So many of our customers will look at running a trial. The approach that we would do is typically deploy it on a sub-production environment. Obviously, the sub-production environment of your ServiceNow instance would require the necessary data. So, historical incident data, and knowledge articles, etc. And as long as that's in the sub-production instance, we securely connect to that. We can extract the data, we can build the models, and we can allow you to do the testing internally. Is there a minimum term, 12 months, how much? So as far as the contractual commercials on it, the costing for the system of intelligent integration to ServiceNow is $1,250 per month, or $15,000 per annum. The pricing is 12 months, so 12-month contracts paid in advance. And included in that is 1,000 interactions for the chat interface. An interaction is a complete conversation end to end. Above 1,000 interactions per month is 50 cents per interaction. However, that being said, if you anticipate you're going to have 5,000 interactions per month coming through the chat interface, we simply put forward a pricing that says, right, that gives you sufficient capacity for that. Any other questions at this stage? No? Okay, well, with that, we finished a little bit early. Hopefully it gives people some time back in their diaries. I'd like to thank everybody for their time joining us today. We'll be sending the webinar out, so keep an eye out for that. We'll process it and send out a link so that you have a copy to it. By all means, if you would like to have a trial or more detailed discussion, we'd certainly love to hear from you. We'll also be running a focused webinar session that'll focus on our intelligent service management platform. So whilst Paul touched on it very briefly today, we'll certainly be running a dedicated session which will really cover off that platform and the ability to build custom applications or workflows on that platform, and how the AI is natively embedded in that platform. So certainly keep an eye out for that, and we look forward to welcome you to that session. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you guys in the next session.